So tell me about why you decided to get into teaching.
Yeah, so it's great. Actually, I went into the global health space like a lot of people who think about it to go work for the big names, the WHO, the WHOs of the world, and the USAIDs of the world, possibly an organization like that.
Scene?
Possibly.
Just putting you on the spot there.
But I realized that there was such an important role for research as an academic. And so that's what I am. I'm an academic physician. And so I have a tripartite or 3-part job. Mm-hmm. And so in that sense, I do work clinically. Mm-hmm. So I do still see patients in the emergency room, very busy. Mm-hmm. I also do teach. And so that involves mostly, in my case, teaching on the wards with medical students and residents for the past 10 years.
I've watched Grey's Anatomy, right? So
yeah,
I've watched Grey's Anatomy. Are you the one in the front with the clip? You know, you're that one.
That's me. That's me.
Yeah?
Except it doesn't really look like that as you
like
as you know.
You don't walk in slow motion.
Right.
Tell the truth. No,
right. And yell a lot. No, not quite. Try not to do that.
Okay. So what year med students or residents are you teaching when you're on the floor?
So for all years, almost everyone in the hospital has to rotate through the emergency department. So I get to know a lot of them, become friends with a lot of them later on. Just kind of exposing them to our crazy lives. But so that's the second part of my job is teaching on the wards. And then the third part, actually, and the largest part of my own role is doing research. Mm-hmm. So every academic in the US, really every academic physician in the world sort of has those roles. Whether or not they're well supported may be another conversation. But yeah, majority of my job, 60% of the time is research, being back home doing that, working in other African countries and other sites, focusing on that.
What is your area of research currently?
Yeah, so I dedicated to working on non-communicable diseases 10 years ago, and I've pretty much been a Puritan with that. There's still a lot to be done, as I mentioned, and so I've had the fantastic opportunity of working with a variety of different Kenyan organizations during that time. I did some work with Ngaruiya Welcome Trust when I first started out, cold calling and cold emailing organizations to just be like, hi, I'm Kenyan. I want to come back and work with people. And one of the organizations that reached out, the executive director at that time was Ngaruiya Welcome Trust. So did a little bit of work with them, have had some really fantastic experiences working with African Population Health Research Center. That's APHRC.
Yes, I did
such a huge fan.
They're great.
Such a huge fan. Their EDs, talk about phenomenal women. Dr. Catherine Chiobutungi, really incredible. I've worked with MOH on some of our national studies on non-communicable diseases, our first ever national study. I was one of the senior contributors to that, and so on and so forth. Aga Khan, UON, Kemri very recently. Yes. So that's where I kind of have tried to go where the need is, where the partnership need is. And yeah, it's been a great journey.
So you get time off from Yale to do this. How does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way it should work is that you get grants or research funding to cover some of your clinical time. So the grant per se, part of it will pay for some of the research, actually, like the data collection part. The other part will actually pay Yale to take away some of my salaries. Take away some of my salary. Take away some of my clinical shifts so that I have time to do the research. And so, like last year, I was actually top 100 nationally in the U.S. in my field as far as federal funding. So it's something that I see as necessary. I mean, money moves the world, as we say, and I'm able to use my own skill sets as a researcher to write these big grants to help various research programs in Kenya or other parts of Africa. And so, yeah, but that's how I play for my clinical time.
With regards to highlights, breakthroughs in your work, non-communicable diseases, what can you share?
Yeah, so honestly, that study that was co-led by the Ministry of Health, Kenya, APHRC, some community and advocacy groups, and a couple of us in academia, was actually really quite a breakthrough. Kenya became the first UN member state with the largest or most prolific type of study that we did. It's actually mandated by the WHO for member nations to do this study nationally to just describe, like, how many people have hypertension,
Yes.
how many people have diabetes, how many people smoke, how many people use,
How many
use
people
heavy
are smoking?
alcohol. So at that time, which has changed, and I'd love to chat about this if we have a second.
Yeah.
It's about 13% of the population were current smokers. That was now 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
Majority men, majority younger population. Right. So that, I think that environment has changed a lot.
Okay.
I wanted to make a quick comment on e-cigarette use because
Yes.
now we see vaping and so on everywhere.
Yes.
At that time, I remember because I was co-leading that paper on the tobacco study, I actually asked the ministry if we could look at this question of e-cigarette use, which is vaping, things like that,
Yes.
electronic cigarettes, and they said, we said, no, this is not really an issue here right now. And surely enough, it was not 6 years ago. It was like such a small percentage, 0.1% or less, that were using e-cigarettes at the time. Very elite population,
Yeah.
and all had graduated from university. And then it's just been honestly my shock and horror to come back after COVID. I didn't come back as much as someone who researches in this topic to see these
The
being
explosion.
distributed so freely and
Yes.
so really
Lots of women.
Yeah.
I see with them now.
it's like a style thing, and I mean, and it's something that breaks my heart. It's something that I purpose to continue working on, but I figured while I'm on your show, I was gonna put a little pitch in for that.
Preach!
A little
Sister,
bit of
preach.
preaching that we don't know what's in those vaping contents.
Yes.
So many argue that they're actually worse than cigarettes or other forms of tobacco use. So just because they may seem cool or they're being marketed by
As
these
safe.
beautiful, lovely looking women
they're
and so
flavorful.
on, and they're flavorful, doesn't mean that they're safe. They're not.
I tend to suffer from respiratory tract infections, laryngitis, pharyngitis, whatever,
Yeah.
bronchitis, and that's why I could never smoke. I tried. It wasn't for me.
I think at different times we've all.
It wasn't
one
for
thing
me.
or the other.
I see it a lot now. I was even surprised people carry them. They have their chargers and everything. I was like,
Yeah.
this is a real culture that people are getting involved to. I tend to exit. Now I've actually stopped all forms of substance use completely. But I think you're right. We don't know. That's why
don't.
researchers like you are very, very important. That's why the policy and legislation needs to come into play.
Absolutely.
More on how to actually get into an Ivy League.
Sure.
SpiceFM.